What's up, everybody? My name's Big Cam, and Daredevil Born Again Season 2 Episode 1 drops later tonight. So Episode 1 breakdown of Season 2 will be coming out very soon on the channel, so stay tuned for that. But for any of those folks out there that don't remember Born Again Season 1 as much as they would like to, we're going to go through and recap all 9 episodes of Daredevil Born Again Season 1 here for you, so you don't have to spend all that time rewatching all of Season 1, and hopefully I can save some time for you so you can jump right on into Season 2 nice and fresh. And let's jump right on into it, shall we? Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again kicked off with Episode 1 titled Heaven's Half Hour, which is a hour-long chunky episode that packs in so much craziness and heartbreak. But we open as we see our amazing trio returning from the Netflix Daredevil series, fulfilling the Nelson, Murdock, and Paige promise as they have their own law firm with all 3 of their names on it. But then quickly, Bullseye ruins the occasion and murders Foggy. And I think he's still alive, but they do triple, quadruple, double down on the fact that he is dead, and this is a big thing that is affecting Matt and the other relationships between like him and Karen and everybody in the show. And like, I don't know, I think Foggy's alive and I am in denial, but I think he's still alive, and I guess we'll find out in Season 2. But Matt does not take this well, that his best friend has been killed by Bullseye, and he breaks his no-kill rule by pushing Bullseye off of the roof and making him splat down onto the ground. But Dex survives this fall, probably from his metal spine that he got from the end of Season 3 of Daredevil. But from the loss of Foggy Nelson, Matt puts away Daredevil for good, and we time jump a year later, and Matt's depressed and living in a penthouse, and he's got a new apartment, and he's got fancy suits, and he carries around Foggy's eulogy card with him in his pocket at all times. And meanwhile, Fisk has been running for mayor, and we see Vanessa has been running Fisk's illegal businesses for him, and she says she has made his business bulletproof. And we see some BB reports of some real New Yorkers on the streets, and this is from BB Urich, Ben Urich's niece, and Ben Urich, of course, was a big character in the Netflix Daredevil Season 1, I believe. And, you know, fuck Fisk, but Ben Urich and Fisk had a relationship, and now it seems BB Urich's character might be on to Fisk a bit, and now she's all grown up and following in Ben's footsteps as a reporter. But we see Matt speak as a witness on the stand at Bullseye's trial, and Karen walks in the middle of it, but Poindexter gets a life sentence for his 11 murders that night. So he didn't just kill Foggy, he killed 10 other people that were at this event as well. And, you know, people in the hallway, and like just going on a crazy murdering spree to start out Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I was like, what a crazy way to start. Like in the first 10 minutes of the show, Foggy's dead. And I was like, what? How can you bring them back and then kill them right away? I was so pissed off at them for that. And I think their excuse was, well, in the comics they killed Karen, so instead we killed Foggy. Well, in the comics they killed people doesn't mean you have to kill them in the show. You fucking assholes. Fuck. But after the trial, Karen and Matt talk on a little bench outside the little courtroom there, and Karen gives Matt his little Daredevil horn that was cut off. She gives it back to him and tells Matt to take care of himself. So they are not on great terms after Foggy's passing, and something happened there that they can't really communicate anymore, and they're not together, and definitely didn't keep the law firm of Nelson, Murdock, and Paige together, and they split up their separate ways. On the news, Matt hears that Fisk has declared his candidacy for mayor, and he's all pissed off about this as the smoke detectors go off in his apartment, and he's like playing with the little horn that Karen gave him. But Matt opened his own law firm, we see, with Kirsten McDuffie, the same woman that Foggy was flirting with the night of his murder, and she was like around and working for the DA's office, but they wanted her to come work with them. And it seems that after Foggy's death, she did end up taking Foggy's advice and getting away from the DA's office, and ended up opening up a firm with Matt called Murdock and McDuffie. But Kirsten sets up Matt to go meet a Dr. Heather Glenn, thinking that this is a client thing and that she needs legal advice. But it's more of a date thing. But she also tricked Heather, who thought that Matt was a client she was meeting and more of like a therapy thing. But Matt smooths things over with Heather after at first coming off a bit abrasive, and they kind of hit it off. Not surprising, because Matt has always been a ladies' man. But the next day we see Matt telling Kirsten that's not cool, but send me her number. And then we also see that Matt has his guy Cherry, who at the beginning of the episode where Foggy dies, they were at a retirement party for a cop who is retiring named Cherry. And Cherry, now retired as a cop, has been working as like a private investigator for Matt in this law firm. And he has Cherry run a check on Fisk for him, and everything comes back squeaky clean. And Matt for a moment thinks, oh, maybe Kingpin's mayoral run is actually sincere. So Matt goes face to face with Fisk and asks him to sit down at a diner with him, and they have a little cup of coffee, and he makes a reference to Hawkeye and Echo, and like, hey, weren't you almost killed by a protege one time? And referring to Echo shooting him in the face at the end of Hawkeye. But they both talk about putting away their darker halves, but Matt tells him if he steps out of line, he will be there. And Fisk pretty much says likewise, if you step out of your line, Mr. Daredevil, I will be there as well. So they both kind of threaten each other, but both kind of have an understanding. If you're on the up and up and I'm on the up and up, we're both good. But if you're fucking around in that darker half, I will be there, motherfucker. But we see Matt goes on a date with Heather and overhears on the news that Fisk has won the mayoral race with 53% of the vote. So just barely won, but still 53% is still a pretty big win in politics. But Fisk says to Vanessa, I know about Adam. And she just says, don't kill him, and makes him promise that he won't. So Fisk promises her that he won't kill Adam, who is this man who Vanessa slept with when Fisk was away doing, the events of Hawkeye and Echo. We then see someone on the streets in the shadows doing some graffiti art on the wall in an alley. That will be a bigger character that comes forward later in the show. But Matt kisses Heather goodnight at her door, and Fisk ends his first speech as mayor with, I love New York. And the first episode ends with Matt out in the chaos in the New York streets as he's looking up down from the streets, and he's looking up like he's almost looking up at Fisk. But Fisk is up on top of a building looking down at the streets. And I was like, man, the parallel shots throughout this entire season of Matt doing something, and then we get the parallel of Kingpin doing it. It's really, really done so well this season. And for what it is, a lot of people said that there's seams and that they didn't like season 1. I truly loved season 1 so much, even with the seams and whatnot. There's certain parts in this show that you can go, okay, maybe that's a little messy, but the stuff with Punisher later in the show in episode 4, absolutely some of my favorite stuff in all of Daredevil. You know what I mean? And I am thoroughly looking forward to what's going to be happening in season 2 after this show, and I thought season 1 was done very well. But that episode 1 heads to credits as we open up episode 2, Optics, and Fisk addresses the city on New Year's Eve and speaks out against vigilantes as he mentions Punisher, Spider-Man, and Daredevil, but not by name, just by their outfits. And then we are introduced to a new character, Hector Ayala, who tries to save someone on the subway platform, but fights these two guys, and one of them ends up tripping and falling in front of a train and is killed and splats, and all the blood goes all over Hector. And it turns out that these guys were undercover cops. And Matt at the police station overhears the cops beating up Hector and decides to represent him as his lawyer. And he's like, I can't afford you. Don't worry about that. Matt's still a good guy and a good lawyer down there at heart. But then we see a creepy young man at Heather's book signing. And we also see Buck Cashman, Fisk's security guy, is there as well. So setting up some problems for Heather and her future there. But then we see a Commissioner Gallo, the current police commissioner, say some choice words to Fisk in saying that he sees right through him and that he's a thug and that he will see him around, Kingpin. And yeah, from this moment on, I knew Gallo's days were numbered, because he spoke very disrespectfully to Kingpin, and he just took it, right? He just took it like as fuel, and he was like, oh, I'll use that later, don't you worry. We then see Cherry and Kirsten go to Hector's wife and go to their house and try to get the wife to come to the court case, as they're representing Hector now, and it will look better if his wife is there in the crowd. And Cherry finds his white tiger costume underneath the bed in a box as he was snooping around. And Matt confronts Hector for being the white tiger, and he says that he has to protect the streets since Daredevil isn't around anymore. And Matt's face sitting in the cell just kind of like, yeah, Daredevil's not around? He's sitting right in front of you. He's so pissed off. He's like, I know I haven't been around. That doesn't mean other vigilantes to get to take my spot. This is my city. Matt's such a little cocky little Daredevil. But like Matt also hears his point. Like, all right, some crazy shit's going down in the streets, and someone needs to protect it, and maybe this is fueling Matt's fire a little bit as well to bring Daredevil back, But we see then Commissioner Gallo comes to resign, and Fisk shows him a picture of his wife and son and blackmails Gallo to stay on as commissioner and not quit. And he goes, all right, I'll stay around. Careful what you wish for. So Gallo still has got some fight in him, even though he knows that Fisk is a dirty man. But Matt follows the dirty cop, Officer Powell, who was the undercover cop from the train platform, the one that didn't die, and the one that Hector was fighting. But Heather calls to cancel date night, and she cancels to meet a new client, and we see that she's doing couples counseling for Fisk and Vanessa, and that's what Buck wanted. But, does Wilson know Heather is dating Matt, or is this just a coincidence? Meanwhile, Matt is waiting outside Officer Powell's house, and he's just kind of like sleeping up against a brick wall, and he's waiting for just any sound or movement to come from Powell's place, and he hears Powell get a phone call, and they're going to kill the key witness in the case that Matt has, and the key witness in Hector's case, and Matt stops them and sends, the witness out the fire escape and says, hey, go meet Cherry, and so now Matt has the key witness, and has him going to the court case and going to meet his other guy there. But Matt sits in his apartment and waits for Powell to come in. We see Powell has a Punisher tattoo on his wrist, and the two dirty cops tried to beat up Matt, right? He's not in his Daredevil costume, so they just beat up a blind lawyer till Matt is bleeding out of his mouth, but then Matt's Daredevil instincts kick in, and he beats their asses as the lawyer, but still lets out that Daredevil roar, and it slams Powell's face down into the ground and picks up his glasses that are shattered and broken. Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I'm not Daredevil. I'm still the lawyer. But then as he puts on the glasses and realizes that they're broken and that he just beat up two dirty undercover cops as Matt Murdock the lawyer, he lets out that classic Daredevil, and then they cut to credits on episode 2. And I was like, you scumbags. Talk about leaving me on a cliffhanger that makes me want to see what happens next and click that next video as we head into episode 3 called The Hollow of His Hand. And Matt goes and talks to Hector before his trial, and Hector tells him about the beach back home with the Koki frogs. And Matt tells him that he's going to see it again and be reunited with his family. And the poor tragic fate for White Tiger. Ugh. Fisk then tells Vanessa that they are done with the underworld nonsense in the petty blood feuds. It doesn't concern them anymore. But Fisk has bloody knuckles, so is he out or is he still in? We then cut over to Matt with his own bloody knuckles from beating up the dirty cops, and he has a run-in with Powell in the bathroom, and Powell is sporting a mean black eye, and Matt pretty much tells him he's a pussy, and goes to court, and Matt overhears a cop with a huge Punisher neck tattoo say, "Torres can't testify." So now it's a race to see if Cherry is going to get the witness to the courthouse before the dirty bastard cops get the witness. So we then see Dirty Powell pulls over Cherry thinking that he's got the witness in the van behind him, but it's just a bait and switch, and we see that Torres is with their other guy getting out of a cab, and the witness makes it to the courthouse, but Torres lies on the stand and doesn't help them, and, you know, it pretty much screws Matt's whole case. And then we see Buck Cashman goes to meet the gangs to settle a beef, because I believe at the beginning of episode 3 here there was like a between the gangs violence, and like it was supposed to be a easy truck drop off, and it ended up like they ended up killing each other. So now Buck is there trying to settle the beef, and you know, he's playing the Fisk or Vanessa role, but all the rest of the bosses don't want to take orders from Fisk's errand boy, and Buck says he doesn't work for the mayor, he works for the man. Ooh, so he doesn't work for Mayor Fisk, he works for the Kingpin? Or is the man Vanessa? And any wrestling fans out there, the man has come around! You know, if you know, you know. But maybe Buck is working kind of for Vanessa here, because we hear Vanessa tell Fisk that she sent Buck to handle the business, and Fisk is like, don't make it a habit of me not trusting you now. And she's like, oh, you don't trust me? Wow. And Fisk says to her that chaos must reign, just for a moment. And Chaos Reign, I think, is a Daredevil comic run. But either way, he's like, let the chaos run for a minute. Let them kill each other. And let that be, you know, sometimes you need to let the chaos happen. And she's like, I don't like this. I don't like watching what I built, the bulletproof business I built for you. And I don't like you destroying it and letting it fall apart. And he's like, all right, I hear you. I hear you. And like, him letting the business get destroyed is Vanessa thinking Fisk is punishing her for Adam and leaving her out in the cold. And he's like, no, I'm not sure. You know, and maybe he is, though. We don't know, because he does have those bloody knuckles, so he's lying to her in some way. We just haven't seen what the lie is yet. We then see back at the courthouse, Hector takes the stand for questioning, and Matt brings up the white tiger mask, revealing his identity to the whole court in the masked vigilante, and, you know, tells Hector his white tiger days are over. But Hector says it's not a mask, it's who he is, a lot like Matt being Daredevil. And, you know, he's like, somebody's got to protect these streets, man. But we see a bunch of testimonies from witnesses that the White Tiger saved, and then to have unbiased reports, you know, instead of the people he saved, they have police reports of officers that the White Tiger saved, proving he isn't just, you know, a saving of the normal people. He isn't a cop killer. He's one of these guys that saves people, is just doing the right thing, you know. And Matt tells the jury that in the mask or not, Hector is a hero. And despite the defense attorney's best attempt to, you know, make Hector a bad guy, Hector is found not guilty, but at what cost? Because we see Hector is free, but not even for a night. He puts the white tiger suit back on and goes out into the streets thinking he's going to protect somebody. He runs towards a scream just to you know, run out to the street, and then a guy in a Punisher vest steps out from the shadows and shoots Hector in the back of the head. And that's, you know, credits on episode 3, as we just hear the sound of the Koki frog, as, you know, we remember what the homeland of White Tiger sounded like. And this is extra sad because the actor who played White Tiger also passed away, I think, from battling cancer. And the actor's name was Camar de los Reyes. And rest in peace, White Tiger, man. You did a good job. And, you know, maybe the White Tiger as a character will live on in season 2, maybe with his niece. But that takes us into episode 4, titled Sic Semper Systema. Kind of like Semper Fi, but Sic Semper Systema, which I think just means like it's a sick, bad system or something like that. I don't know. But either way, we pick up this episode with Matt picking up Hector's personal items from the medical examiner, and his niece Angela Ayala comes in wanting to see her T.O., and she is fiery and a little bit aggressive, but she will be returning as a white tiger. We saw like a set photo of her in a type of white tiger costume, so she will be back for season 2 of Daredevil Born Again, and she thinks it's the dirty cops who killed Hector, and she says this great line of like, it was the dirty cops, I know it, and he's just Hector from the Heights, why would it matter, you know, like, and I really like this girl's fire, and just like her little moment here as she like hugs Matt and she's like crying. I was like, damn son, she's good. Who's this little girl? Because she's damn good. And yeah, I hope she gets a bigger role in season 2. We then see Muse in his creepy mask carrying somebody down the train tracks to where his secret lair is. Ooh. So our first introduction to one of the big bads of season 1 in the character Muse, and it doesn't come until episode 4. Interesting. We then cut over to BB as she's out clubbing with Daniel Blake, who is played by Michael Gandolfini, friggin' Tony Soprano's son, and she's using him to get information about Fisk, and we see a new white tiger graffiti outside the building that they're in, and then, you know, this little like cross-camera cut between Daniel getting in a cab to the homeless man on the street getting arrested for shoplifting some fiddle-faddle caramel corn. We then cut over to couples counseling, and Vanessa says it was Adam's hands that she was most attracted to, and this kind of disgusts his fists. He's like, I don't need to hear this, you know, like, and I can't stop thinking about his hands and how much you love his hands and touching you, and you don't love my big Kingpin hands. But of course Adam is more of an artist type, which is very different than Wilson, and we also hear that Vanessa never got a chance to end the affair with Adam because Wilson and Adam had a dialogue, as he says, and they both say that they don't know where Adam is, but we find out later that Fisk is lying and he does know where Adam is. We then see Kirsten ask Matt to go do a freebie down at the courthouse for them, and, you know, to get back somebody. And Matt goes to do the freebie, and we see that it's the homeless man that was arrested for shoplifting, and his name is Leroy Bradford. And he gives Matt a hard time, you know. Oh, I get blind justice. All right, serve me up the blind justice. Let's go, blind man. You know, like, and he was arrested for stealing fiddle faddle, and, you know, he really is dead set on probation. And because Mr. Bradford is dead set on probation, Matt goes to talk to Sophia, who works at the courthouse here, and Matt uses his flirting skills to use the fact that she had some Latvian, you know, heritage in her cake this morning, and it's Latvian Heritage Day, and he flirts with her, and she, like, seems like those two might hit it off quite a bit, actually. And I was like, damn, I want to see Sophia and Matt go on a date, but just ladies man Matt as per usual, and just showing how good a flirter he is. But he ends up getting Mr. Bradford not the probation that he asked for, but gets his sentence down to 10 days, which is a miracle. And then he runs into Officer Powell at the courthouse, and from his heartbeat Matt can tell that he wasn't the one who killed Hector. And, you know, even though Matt definitely thought he was, but Officer Powell threatens Matt, and Matt tells him, well, you're gonna need more guys than you had last time, though, wouldn't you? And he's like, all right, I guess I'll see you around. And so Matt just creates some enemies here for sure, but Powell wasn't the one who killed Hector, so who was the person that killed Hector? Because it's definitely not the Punisher, right? I hope not. But Matt goes back to Leroy to tell him about his sentence getting down to 10 days, and Leroy is still not happy with the 10 days, and he's got a lot of good points, but he's like, it's a broken system, man, and they are willing to spend 5 times as much to lock him up than it is to feed him. And Matt's like, sad, but he's also like, you're right. Like, I'm over here telling you that 10 days is a gift. He goes, and all I want to be is out on the streets with probation, which, is a lot longer than 10 days in jail. Like, you have to go months on probation with no slip-ups or they'll send you back, But he needs to be out so he can get food stamps. And the last time he was locked up for 30 days, he wasn't able to meet them for his food stamps, and then he wasn't able to get them. So then he's out there on the curb stealing food because he wasn't able to get the free food stamps that he's living off of, So the poor guy, Leroy, he's just down bad and had bad luck, and he's, just not doing great in the world, and the system is so broken that it's fucking this guy over, and they're spending 5 times as much to keep him locked up, and all the guy wants is a meal, Like, that's crazy. But then we move over to seeing Fisk having to deal with his mayoral duties as he's sitting through these kids singing, "We built this city, we built this city on rock and roll." And all the kids are like just singing so poorly, and they're like, okay, for the second song, and Fisk is like, no, thank you, you guys were great, we're out of here. But during his little mayoral day, a negative report about him comes out from Bigg, and her report calls him a union buster and garbage mayor, and he's all pissed. He's like, I gotta find out where this leak came from. But the leak came from Daniel, of course, from partying that night with Bigg. But as this is all happening, Fisk is getting shuttled around to random BS, and he's like at now Latvian Heritage Day and getting sung in Latvian now, "We built this city," and he's just like, good God, how long do I need to sit here and listen to these guys singing at me? And then back at his office, Fisk yells at his staff, and, anyone who was found the problem of this leak will be fired. But Daniel comes clean and does some grade A ass kissing to save his and Sheila's job, and Fisk tells Daniel that he's going to make a better man out of him, and that if he ever does something like this again, it will be the last thing he ever does. And Daniel's like, it will never happen again, Fisk. But like, Fisk for some reason likes this kid Daniel. Now, does he see like a son type figure in him? He kind of is like a little baby Fisk. Well, he is a baby soprano, and there's a part later in this show that Daniel literally looks like a spitting image of a young Tony Soprano, and I was like, holy shit, no wonder why they cast this guy. We then see Matt out on the street using his super hearing to find where the shell casing of the guy who killed Hector, and it was on like a hill, so the shell casing rolled down, and he uses like a little nip and he kicks it and it rolls down the hill, and he uses the gravity of something else to find where the shell casing would have rolled to, and he finds out that it has a Punisher logo on it. So Matt goes and finds Frank Castle in his little safe house, and Frank is sporting some long hair and a big beard, and he's hiding out and almost hatchets Matt when he sees him for the first time, and he's like, "Man, it's me, Matthew," and he's like, "Oh, what's up, Red? How you doing?" But Frank calls all the cops bullshit fanboys, and he goes, that's nothing to do with me. He's like, okay, I got nothing to do with you, huh? And Matt and Frank have this incredible scene where they're talking about Foggy and like, oh yeah, he got life. Did Foggy get life? Oh, Matt's like breaking down crying. And then like he goes, I hear my son, man. And he says to me, get him, daddy. Like some of the Frank Castle lines in this episode are fucking tremendous. He's like, oh, am I supposed to thank you for your service? Hey, thank you for your service, counselor. Like this little exchange between the two of them like lives rent free in my head. Like I absolutely love the Punisher and Frank and like Matt together so much. And even if the rest of the show was ass, at this point in episode 4, I was fully in, and this was actually edited kind of weird because this wasn't originally supposed to be this early in the show, but because it got reworked with the strikes and it was like, they took a different vision in the show, but they kept some stuff from the first time around. Like the next episode is kind of like a filler episode, but you could tell from the first side of things. But like for something that was stitched together, I think this season is still incredible. And like this Matt and Frank scene here, and he's like, you know, say his name, counselor. Say his fucking name, Red. Foggy. Foggy was his name. Yeah, did Foggy get life? How's Foggy doing, huh? You know, like, oh, he's talking so much shit to him, but like, you know, Matt, he punches him and he's like, I'm sorry, Frank. And he goes, that's the first honest thing you did, Red. You know, like, it honestly brings like chill bumps and tears to my eyes just thinking about it. Like, oh, what a good friend Frank is to Matt, but also Frank's a hard bastard. But like, how does Frank now end up in Spider-Man Brand New Day? Like, that's going to be wild to see how that happens. We then cut back to Fisk and Vanessa says she's not the same woman she was. And Fisk says, no, she's something even more extraordinary. So, you know, she thinks she's not the same woman that he fell in love with, but Fisk thinks she's even better, but doesn't know if their connection is really there still, you know, after Adam. But Matt comes back to his apartment and finds Heather at his place waiting for him, and they talk about their days and, like, you know, talks about his day and gives him some, you know, therapeutic advice, you know, kind of as his therapist, but still like his girlfriend. And then he tries to ask her about her day, but she kind of, it's confidential, it's a tough day, whatever. And then they hook up and they kind of have a little kinky sex. But then, you know, she's sleeping in his bed, and we cut to like Matt hearing Fisk's footsteps in the middle of the night. And we cut to Fisk in the middle of the night going to his secret lair, where we see he has the rabbit in the snowstorm from season 3 of Daredevil still covered in his blood, and he's got it in this secret vault down here. And Matt, we then see, has a secret lair still, and he secretly still has a bunch of Daredevil suits in this little lockup on top of his roof. And we see him training in the middle of the night, swinging around like a baton or whatever, using his Daredevil gadgets. And then we see Fisk, as, you know, they're cutting back and forth with the parallels here, both of them in their secret lives. Fisk, you know, in the last time we talked to Matt said he was losing weight. He's been dieting, and like we see the meals he eats throughout the day are like real small portions. But in his secret lair here at night, we see Fisk sitting down to eat a big old Tony Soprano-sized portion of a meal, and he eats this in front of Adam, who he has locked up. You know, so he does know where Adam is, and he was lying to Vanessa, and the Kingpin is still in there, and the Kingpin is not gone, and our boy Fisk has been bulking up eating these big meals as Matt trains, trying to bring back his Daredevil side. And then we see what Muse was doing with that body at the beginning of the episode, and he's draining his blood in his creepy blood den down in the subways with blood art up on the walls and blood dripping from his mask hole, eye holes, like creepy. But that's credits on episode 4, so I was like, ooh, juicy stuff. Adam's alive, Muse is getting introduced as this creepy blood villain that's gonna be going around at the same time as everything. Frank Castle in this episode. Heather is like Fisk and Vanessa's couples counselor, but she's also dating Matt. Like, this is some juicy stuff happening through 4 as we head into the middle episode of the series, or there's 9, so yeah, I guess 5 would be the middle episode of the series. And this one is titled With Interest, and that's probably because they're at a bank for this whole episode. And it's kind of a filler episode for some, but I enjoyed this little side quest because this episode takes place on St. Patty's Day, and there's a bank robbery at New York Mutual Bank, and Matt was just there trying to settle some cash flow problems for his law firm. And at the bank, Matt talks to Kamala Khan's father, Yusuf, who is the bank teller he's like speaking to, and he works there but isn't able to help him with his loan. So Matt leaves, and a group of Irish guys rush in colored ski masks, and they rush in to rob the bank, and, you know, start to rob the place, and they're threatening people. And Matt's walking down the street on the phone and overhears the bank being robbed, so runs back in. But he runs back in as the lawyer Matt Murdock, so he's not like Daredevil, but he's still like, I can help them. They're not going to hurt these hostages, and they're not going to rob this bank on Matt Murdock's watch, you know? Like, on the inside now, Matt makes sure they don't hurt the hostages, and he talks a little too slick, and multiple times the robbers point their weapons right at him and on his chest or like on his face, and like, you know, I know he's blind, but still, man, like, you gotta feel that gun is right there on your face, like you're gonna get your head blown out because you won't shut up. But Matt says he needs to go to the bathroom and beats up the red masked guy on the staircase and steals his mask. And he goes and saves Yusuf Khan, and he's at the vault. And Matt uses his hearing and his special hearing hands to open the vault. And Yusuf is like, how did you do that? What kind of lawyer are you? And Matt's like, a really good one. But in this vault, he finds lock boxes that need 2 keys per box to open. And one would be the customers and one would be the bank tellers. And in the vault, they're trying to find the correct vault that the key matches up to, and they end up finding a jewelry box with one big ass diamond that's almost orange in color, and it looks like it could maybe be like a soul stone, that kind of, like, it was a big orange stone, and they say it was a diamond, but like my first instinct and first thought was, what was the orange infinity stone? I think that was the soul stone. But Matt now has what they're looking for and tries to negotiate with the robbers, but at the very same time as he's negotiating, the police rush into the bank and grab all the robbers. But the green masked leader of the robbers changes into a cop uniform and tries to ditch the diamond to a woman that was one of the hostages, and she was like their inside man. And, you know, the guy tries to beat it out the side in the cop uniform, but Matt goes after the robber and he puts on the red ski mask, but he's still in like his friggin' lawyer outfit. So this guy could probably just go, yeah, this is definitely that lawyer that was just giving us a hard time in there. The solicitor, as he kept calling him. But Matt goes after this guy and breaks his knee and curb stomps the guy unconscious in the alley. And we see that the diamond that he, you know, gave to the little inside woman was actually a fake. And Matt saved the real diamond and left the diamond in Yusuf's candy bowl. And Yusuf finds it like, wait, who the hell was that lawyer? He's a really good lawyer. But then they make plans to have dinner in Jersey, and he's like, as long as that famous Kamal is there. So now I'm dying after this one little filler episode. Now I'm dying to see Daredevil and Miss Marvel and Kamala having some dinner. You know, like, I don't even necessarily want to see them together being heroes. I just want to see Matt Murdock, the lawyer, having dinner with the Kamala Khan family, and I think that would just be hilarious. You know, like, if anything from the Miss Marvel TV show, like, if you didn't like it, it is what it is. But I think we can both agree that Kamala's family was awesome. And, like, still, Kamala's family getting dragged into the Marvels movie, still one of the better parts. Like, Kamala's brother, father, and mother are freaking hilarious. You know, like, I love their family. But that's credits on episode 5 as we head into episode 6 titled Excessive Force. And we see on the BB report, a bunch of people are starting to notice the new graffiti art popping up around the city. And we also see a clip of Swordsman, aka Jack Duquesne from Hawkeye. But we see a worker finds a body with their eyes gouged out, and the paint that all these arts are made of aren't washing off like it should be. We then cut over to Matt, and he's sitting on the side of his bed praying, and he's holding Foggy's eulogy card as he remembers the events of the night of Foggy's death. And I think it's his seemingly death, because Foggy's not dead, holding on to hope. But we then see one of the gang guys that's supposed to be, you know, working in the underworld of Fisk's business and not with the lawyer side of things. He comes to Fisk's mayor office and tells him to shove his 1.8 up his ass, and he doesn't want to pay the restitution that Vanessa told him to pay to, you know, keep things quiet. But Fisk ups the restitution to 2.8 million, and, you know, pretty much tells him, go fuck yourself, you know, like, and this is what you get for showing up at my office. And Luca very much does not want to pay the 2.8 and has no intentions to pay that money. We We then cut back over to Matt's place, and Heather is there telling Matt about her next book that her publicist wants her to write, and she's like, I think it's going to be about vigilantes and what the mask really means. And she asks Matt to introduce her to Frank Castle or Daredevil so that she can talk to some real vigilantes for this book, and little does she know, she's already been talking to Daredevil, but he hasn't put the suit back on yet. But I mentioned a little bit earlier, like the whole season we've been seeing parallels between Fisk and Matt, and we see how both of their second lives are getting dangerously close to their main life. As, you know, Luca is in his mayor office and Heather is asking Matt about Daredevil. It's like, listen, these two lives are getting too close to each other. We then see a guy from sanitation who was one of the guys who was a hostage at the bank last episode and Matt saved, but this sanitation guy tells Fisk that the graffiti art is made out of blood, and he seemed to apply some epoxy over it so that it's extra impossible to wash off. So all of these Muse arts are made with human blood, but won't be able to get washed off. So these like dead bodies are just like stuck there, you know, and like it's going to take some serious washing to get these things off. We then see Angela Ayala comes over to Matt's office to talk to him, and she wants to finish Hector's work. And she says that Hector was tracking something, and she thinks it has to do with all of the missing people's reports. And, you know, he's kind of like, don't worry about it, they will handle it. And she's like, come on, man. And Angela asks Matt for help, but he says he can't, and it seems like Angela is going to be the one that lights this fire under Matt's ass to get back into the action, you know, because if he doesn't, she's gonna go off and be the White Tiger herself and try and solve this mystery. But we then cut over to see Muse is doing some artwork, and two drunk girls come up to him and ask to take a picture with him, and they're like, are you Muse? Can we take a selfie? You know, and this is something that was ripped right out of the comic books, but these two women end up becoming the next two victims for Muse's crimes. We then see Vanessa and Fisk talk about the similarities and differences between the Kingpin job and the mayor job, and she gives him some pointers for his event tonight. And she says that the wealthy elites, that, you know, he's there asking them for money, and we see Jack Duquesne, the swordsman, is at this event, and he doesn't buy into Fisk's plans and sends him a warning, which will probably be a bigger mistake by the swordsman. You know, you don't warn Fisk, he warns you, you know, and Fisk, you know, sends this message back to him in a later episode. But we also see from all of those late night dinners, Fisk is beginning a big boy, and he rips his suit jacket, and he's bulking up again. He's becoming the big old Kingpin. He's not as skinny as he was in episode 1. We then see Cherry comes to Matt's office and reluctantly tells Matt about Muse, in that he's been painting with his victim's blood. And Matt, you know, this is like the final straw. Matt's finally like, I gotta go find this guy because the cops aren't doing a good enough job. I gotta go take down this serial killer, you know what I mean? But then we cut over to Buck and Daniel, and they come to show Fisk Muse's most recent victims, and we see the two girls that were asking for a photo, and they have gotten their eyes gouged out, and they're like sitting below a new, you know, mural or whatever. And the streets, you know, from the BB reports, are very worried about these missing girls and the murders and what Muse has been doing with the blood of his victims. You know, the streets are very cautious about this and worried about what's going on. They're like, we need somebody to take down this Muse guy. And what is Fisk's response to all this? Instead of hiring more police to get Muse, he ends up hiring all of the police's bad apples to come work on a special task force, which he will see over. And we see dirtbag Officer Powell is there, and an Officer Cole North, who we'll figure out more about in a later episode. But, you know, all of the bad apples and all the dirty cops in the NYPD, that is who Fisk handpicked to be on the Anti-Vigilante Task Force. And this is going to be a problem for the rest of the season and into season 2. But Angela didn't listen to Matt, and she went down into the tunnels tracking Muse. And oh no, she is going to be Muse's next victim because Muse grabs her and knocks her out unconscious and is walking her back to his secret lair. Uh-oh. But Angela's mom calls Matt for help looking for Angela, and she doesn't know where she is and hasn't found her. And Matt says, you know, don't worry, don't go anywhere, I'll find her. And he goes to call the cops, but goes, you know what, fuck it. And literally says fuck it in a Marvel show, which I loved. And he's like, fuck it. And he goes and puts on his red Daredevil suit, the new one for this Born Again series. And we see him go into action. And we see Muse bring Angela back to his secret lair. And there's more bodies hanging above her, like his other victims that he's draining their blood out of. And Muse injects her with something and then jabs a bigger needle into her chest to like start draining her blood. And I was like, oh my god, this guy's fucked. But we then see Fisk goes to see Adam with an axe, and he opens up Adam's cell door and gives Adam the axe to make it more of a fair fight. So he's like, listen, I'll give you this weapon because I know I'm much bigger than you, but we're gonna fight. So fucking Adam takes the axe and swings it at Fisk, and those two start fighting. But then we see at the same time, Matt as Daredevil is able to track down Angela, and he's running down the train tracks, and him and Muse fight as Adam decides to fight Fisk. So we're getting a Muse and Daredevil fight as Fisk is fighting Adam. It's not necessarily a direct parallel, you know, but like still, both darker halves, the Kingpin and Daredevil, are now in the middle of a fight together, or not together, but at the same time, but in different locations. And we see Matt hangs Muse unconscious with like his baton. He literally hangs him, you know, until he goes unconscious, and then he runs over and gives Angela CPR, and she's gonna be okay. She comes back to life, and you're like, oh my god, Angela, I thought we almost lost 2 Ayalas in this series, but no, Angela Ayala is okay. She will be back. But, you know, Matt saves her, but he looks over as soon as she wakes up, and Muse runs away. So Muse is alive, but he got away. But it looks like Fisk didn't kill Adam, just beat him up very badly, and, you know, drags him back into his cell, and then is like sitting there over him as like, you know, good fight, brother, we'll do this again tomorrow. You know, like, so this is why Fisk has had those bloody knuckles. He's been beating up Adam, and yeah, it looks like Fisk is just gonna keep beating up Adam if he's not dead yet. And Matt is back as Daredevil, as he, like, you know, was fighting Muse and let out like another Daredevil roar. It's always good to hear Punisher roar and Daredevil roar, like slightly different. Matt's is like, ah, where like Punisher's is more guttural and it's, ah! You know, if you know, you know. I just nailed both of those impersonations, though. But that is credits on episode 6 as we head into episode 7, titled Art for Art's Sake. And we see Buck and Daniel tell Fisk about Angela Ayala surviving a Muse attack and being saved by Daredevil. And Fisk immediately is like, oh, so he's back. Get out. So Daredevil, he's back. And he like almost grins like he's happy about this. But maybe Fisk isn't happy about this because he knows Daredevil being back is his new biggest problem. Like, he thought Muse was a problem. He hears Daredevil's back. Even bigger problem. So then we cut over to Angela in the hospital trying to remember what happened to her, as we cut then to Matt in the shower at his home trying to forget what happened from the night before, and there's like blood that he's washing out of his hair. And then Heather comes into the bathroom and, you know, takes off her robe and goes to get in the shower with Matt and sees his bruising on his back and, you know, doesn't ignore it, but then, you know, Matt ignores it and kind of starts hooking up with her in the shower. But she's too smart for this, and afterwards she notices the bruises and asks him about them, and he's not getting them from work, and she knows he's not getting them from being a lawyer, so she's like worried about Matt, and he kind of just tells her to brush it off. He's like, you know, it's embarrassing, I fell in the street, it's no big deal. You know, like, he's a real bad liar when it comes to like, hey, why are you beat up? Like, you were just in a fight, you're a blind guy, you know. But then Daredevil, of course, if he was just like, hey, I'm Daredevil, oh yeah, that's why you're so beat up. But anybody that doesn't know he's Daredevil, they're like, why is this blind guy so beat up? Is he a masochist? You know, like... But then at his office, Cherry is pissed that Matt went in as Daredevil after he asked him not to. And Matt tells Cherry that the serial killing spree by Muse was at 60 kills. And he stopped 61. And he would have got Angela as 61 last night. And he says the cops weren't getting it done. And I found Muse in one night. And Cherry is still pissed. But Matt says, you know, it used to be in times like this that you used to call me, you know, and like, so maybe Matt's feeling himself a little too much here, but he's also like, hey, you know, shit used to hit the fan and you used to call Daredevil, you know, and now you don't want Daredevil to come out? Like, come on, I did a good job last night. How about, hey, good job saving that girl, finding Muse. How about that? No praise, only hate. We then see Fisk explaining to Buck the kind of threat that Daredevil really is, because Buck was like, Daredevil taking out Muse? That's not the worst thing, is it? And he goes, no, this is terrible. Daredevil being back is bad. He single-handedly took out a business that he built for 10 years. You know, so he, you know, explaining to Buck how very, very important it is to have Daredevil off of the board. You know, and him back is a problem. But Matt goes to see Angela at the hospital, and Angela tells Matt that Muse was also painting faces and like portraits and these little blood portraits that Matt didn't see when he was there, but he will, you know, go back to this place to find these portraits to see who Muse was painting. Vanessa meets with Luca to plot Fisk's murder? And like at the moment you're like, is she plotting his murder, or is she, you know, maybe just seeing where Luca's at, you know, and she's just telling him what he wants to hear. But Luca was pretty much like, hey, I don't want to pay this restitution, and I want to take out the big man and have Vanessa running the company again. And Vanessa's like, are you asking me permission, or are you asking me, like, you know, if it's okay by me? And he's like, you know, both. You know, like, what's the deal? We then see Detective Kim telling Mayor Fisk about the lead suspect for Muse, and they tell him about Bastian Cooper, who's this young troubled boy with a troubling past and a troubling record. But he is also at that same moment at Heather Glenn's office as a new client. And why would he be there? To get at Daredevil? To get at Fisk? Or just by coincidence? But we see Bastian creepily talking to Heather and creepily starts to get a bloody nose and then uses the blood to draw his Muse mask on a piece of paper in front of him. And, you know, Heather's like creeped out and she tries to make a run for it, but Bastian knocks her out against the door and, like, you know, slams her rather aggressively. And I was like, God damn, Heather, are you alright, dude? Like, but Heather's knocked out, and we cut over to Matt as Daredevil, and he goes to Muse's lair and finds the face blood drawings and sees and realizes that these are Heather's face, and we get a cross shot of him feeling the blood painting of Heather's face, and then he, like, you know, we see a shot of Matt in his apartment touching Heather's face, you know, like the intimate version of this versus like the creepy version of this, where it's like, this guy wants to murder you and use your blood as paint, and this guy loves you, so he's blind and he's trying to see you with it by touching your face, you know, like, oof. But so is Bastian there as a patient for Heather, as a client? Is he there because Fisk is using Heather, or is he there because Daredevil is Heather's boyfriend? It does just seem like it's a coincidence and that Muse picked Heather because he's a fan of her books, and he starts cutting her and like making her bleed and, you know, starts to like drain her blood, and he's going to make her his like final art piece on the ground in like her office, and it's like creepy. But the cops show up as soon as he starts, you know, to cut Heather, and he starts rushing because of this, and he's like, oh, it's too soon, they're too soon. So like they start starts cutting Heather and rushing to try and make this all happen. He starts to like lose it a little bit. And Heather says, anyone who wears a mask is a coward, and then starts, to fight again. But Daredevil comes crashing through the window at this very moment, and we get Muse versus Daredevil round 2, but this time in Heather's office, and Matt shoots his baton through Muse's shoulder and pulls him back, and then like pulls him across his canvas to like use Muse to paint with his own blood. And I was like, damn, this is a crazy shot. And Muse was like charging at Heather with a knife, and Heather grabbed Muse's gun that Daredevil was able to get out of his hands. So Heather grabs the gun, and as Muse and Daredevil are fighting, Heather shoots Muse and kills him. But right after Heather kills Muse, Heather passes out from losing too much blood, but Matt is able to stabilize her before Fisk's Anti-Vigilante Taskforce rushes in, and even though Daredevil saved the day, Fisk's Taskforce is going to take credit for this. And then we see Daniel threaten BB Urich in Fisk's office, and he's being real Tony Soprano-esque, and he tells her to write that the Taskforce got Muse, and she's like, that's bullshit. And he's like, yeah, it might be, but you're smart, and you owe me from that last time, so you're going to write this, or you're going to have a bad rest of your life. But I would totally want you to have a cool rest of your life, so make a good decision. So he like acts like Kingpin, but he acts like a really friendly version of Kingpin, but yet at the end of the day, it's still just as deadly. And you're like, ooh. So like, I hope in season 2, we get to see Daniel and Buck being a little bit more sinister, and we get to see a darker side of Buck, because we hear Buck being a little bit dark, but I feel like he's just trying to do his best Fisk impersonation type of thing, you know what I mean? But I don't know, I guess we'll see. We then see Heather wake up at the hospital, and she thinks she like is remembering what happened, and she thinks Daredevil said her name. So is this her making the connection that Daredevil knows her, or that Daredevil is Matt? So maybe that's something that comes up in season 2. But we then see Fisk is on the news with the Anti-Vigilante Taskforce holding up Muse's mask, taking credit for this arrest or this killing of Muse. But then they kind of end out this episode with Vanessa texting Luca with Fisk's location, saying he's alone. And Luca goes in to kill Fisk, but Buck steps out of the shadows watching Fisk's back and shoots Luca. And Fisk just goes, "Thank you, Buck," and asks him to call Vanessa to ask if she wants him to bring home any leftovers and any food for her. So was Vanessa setting Luca up to die? Or was she warned Buck to watch Fisk's back here? Or like, did Fisk know all along what Vanessa was up to with Luca? But either way, she was working with Luca or she wasn't. I don't know. But that's credits on episode 7 as we head into episode 8, titled Isle of Joy, which is another crazy episode. And this episode opens on a blue rose, and this has to be on Riker's Island, where Dex is being held as a prisoner. And he gets taken out of solitary confinement and put into Gen Pop. But who made that call? So then we see Vanessa and Fisk were on the same page last episode, in that she wanted to kill Luca because he was grasping at power, and she goes, it was embarrassing to watch. So now this makes Fisk trust Vanessa again, because, Vanessa could have easily had Luca kill Fisk, and then she took over as, the Kingpin, but Fisk is the mayor, and she doesn't really want anything to do with that, but she does want to be with Wilson still, So he trusts her now and brings her to his little safe house. Oh boy. But we cut over to Heather thinking that Muse and Daredevil and like all of this since she killed Muse, and she's like got it all figured out now. And she's like, they're all the same, and they put on the mask and they're the same thing. And Matt's like, I wouldn't say that, like Daredevil saved you and Muse was there to kill you. And she's like, yeah, they were both there from themselves. I saved me. And Matt's kind of like, oh, okay. When there's a knock at the door, and this is Buck, and he's there to invite Heather to a ball, or like a little gala dance thing. And Matt's like, how do you know that man, and how did he know that you were staying here? And Buck's like, well, the mayor likes to know a lot about his citizens. And Matt's like, fuck you, shut the door on him. But Matt's like starting to freak out at her, like, how do you know him? Please tell me Fisk isn't a client. If he is, he's in our lives, and that can't happen. And, you know, he's inviting Heather to this gala, and Heather invites Matt to be her +1 if he thinks Fisk is so bad. And he's like, fine, I'll go with you. But he doesn't want to, but he says he will, because he does care about Heather, but he knows Fisk is up to something dirty. But we then see Fisk show Vanessa that he's been keeping Adam in a cell, and he puts a key and a gun on the table, you know, so now it's up to her. Put Adam out of his misery or set him free. But either way, he can't necessarily go free. Fisk has made that very clear. So really, you know, he's just giving her the option to put him out of his misery. And Vanessa chooses the gun and kills Adam. And Fisk turns this like into a romantic moment for the two of them. And like we haven't seen them really do any physical touch all season. And then she kills Adam right in front of him. And he like touches her face and like holds her. And he's like, I will never ever leave you again. I will always be with you. And she's like, I know. And like they like hugging and almost, I think they might kiss, but no, I don't think we actually saw them kiss this season. But still, you know, like Wilson and Vanessa, we got to see them fucking some more. You know, if they're like this kingpin power couple, they gotta be, you know, fucking, right? Matt is then late to the office, but Kirsten tells Matt that Poindexter got moved into Gen Pop, and he's like, but who moved him? She's like, I knew you'd ask that. He was moved by Mayor Fisk, and Poindexter has been asking for Matt. And, you know, Matt at first was like, why would he be asking for me? But then he hears that Fisk is the reason that he got moved, so he's like, all right, maybe I will go talk to Poindexter and see what he has to say. But we see Fisk makes Daniel the deputy mayor of communications and sends him to deal with the city council. Bad news for the city council. But either way, Matt tells Kirsten that everything they do feels hopeless, that they're not serving justice, that they're babysitting chaos. And Matt goes back to Josie's and talks to Cherry about going to see Dex. But then he realizes that Foggy was celebrating that night that he died because he knew he was going to win his case. And somebody silenced him. And Matt runs out. And Josie's like, he didn't use his cane. And Cherry's like, oh, I didn't notice. But then we see Matt go to see Dex in prison. And Dex tells him that another night in this prison and he might be dead. And, you know, Matt's like, fuck you, dude. You deserve to die. But says in another life, you know, you'd be defending me because that's what good men do, right? They defend the ones that they hate. And Matt's like, you know, fuck you, brother. You know, like, kind of gets to Matt, but also kind of like, still fuck you, Dex. But Dex says to him that he will tell him who hired him to kill Foggy, but he's got to be on the outside. And Matt goes, I don't trust you for a second. But, you know, maybe he wants to hear what he has to say. And Matt slams his head off the table and makes him bleed, and then tells the guard that he started slamming his own face off the table. And Dex is like, thank you, counselor, as he gets dragged out of there. But, interesting. We then cut over to the gala that Fisk is hosting, and we see BB and Daniel are there getting shots together along with Commissioner Gallo, the swordsman, and other big investors for Fisk. But this is going to be a big night for the city of New York, it seems. But Heather also is there, and she's looking for Matt, thinking he bailed on her, when Fisk and Vanessa walk out, looking like they've never been closer. And they walk out, she's in all red, and he's in all white, and they look very elegant and beautiful, but very powerful as well. We then see back at the prison, Dex is getting stitched up for Matt slamming his face into the table, and he got his tooth loosened in this process. So did Matt purposefully loosen his tooth, or was this just something that happened when Matt did this? I'm not sure if this was intentional by Matt or if this was a mistake by Matt, but still, Dex's tooth is loosened enough that he uses the tooth to kill the guard that's right there and gets his hands loose, throws the 2 other knives that are right there to kill the other 2 guys in the room. And the room turns blue and we hear the patented like bees almost buzzing in your ear, and this is like the noise that we always hear when we see Dex in Netflix Daredevil season 3. But now in Born Again we have this like blue light that comes on with this bee buzzing every time we see Dex enter like this bullseye mode. You know what I mean? It's crazy. But at the gala, we then see Vanessa tell Heather that they won't be needing her services anymore. And, you know, that they figured it out, you know, so they're all good. So Heather doesn't have to couple counsel Fisk anymore. So maybe Matt, you know, nothing to worry about, dude. Or maybe even more to worry about. But Matt then shows up at the gala and Heather's like, you've been checking out on me. Like, dude, are you checking out right now? And as she's like saying, you're checking out on me, Matt checks out on her and is listening to Fisk's conversation with the swordsman. And Fisk sends a warning right back to Jack. And Jack is, you know, this warning's much more of a threat than Jack's warning earlier in the season. You should Jack's in trouble. But then we see as like Fisk is sending Jack on his way, a reporter snuck a photo of Fisk, and Fisk sends Powell to go after him. And we see Powell assault this reporter by putting his hand into a grease fryer. And he does this right in front of Commissioner Gallo, telling him that he ain't gonna do shit and that he doesn't take orders from him anymore. So literally in front of the police commissioner, and the police commissioner can't do anything because these are now the mayor's cops. Like they're not even real NYPD anymore because they're not listening to the chief of the NYPD. Like that's crazy. Gallo, after seeing this though, talks to BB Urich, and you know she's asking him if you know he has anything to do with the task force, and he's like, no, I have nothing to do with the task force. How much do you know about the mayor? And he asks her if she knew that Fisk was the main suspect in her Uncle Ben's murder, and she does say that she knew that. So maybe she's been after Fisk this whole time to like prove, you know, her uncle's death, you know, was his fault. I don't know. But she does, you know, get Gallo to agree that he'll work with her, and like he gives her a card and is like, hey, call me. But, you know, she says she's got to go back to work. So she goes drinking more shots with Daniel, and he says he has some files on the entire task force that she could look at. So maybe BB is going to expose the whole thing wide open. Or not. Matt is like real pissed though at this gala, and he's like charging up to Fisk when a spotlight comes on, and Fisk and Vanessa have their first dance, and they're really, you know, hamming it up, and Fisk is like doing finger guns and like blowing on his fingers and just being like, ha 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 ha, I'm in charge and rich, ha 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 ha, so much power I have as the Kingpin, ha ha ha, you know, like such a ham he is though. It cracked me up. But Heather and Matt join in the dancing, and Matt's like, you're gonna have to lead, and dances with her. And Fisk is like, what do you think you would find here, devil? And like as he's dancing with Vanessa, he's like speaking in just a soft enough tone that he knows Matt can hear it across the dance floor, but nobody else can, you know, and like, oh, it's such a good little scene here. But as they're dancing, we see Dex has arrived and he's taking position, but Buck warns Fisk and Vanessa that Dex has escaped prison, and you know Vanessa's like, I have to tell you something, Wilson, and Matt overhears Vanessa being worried about this and puts it together that it wasn't Fisk because he was away, it was Vanessa who was running his business that ordered the hit on Foggy and ordered Foggy to be killed, and he's like, oh my god, it was her. So he cuts in the dance and, you know, ends up, oh, can you excuse us? And then Heather ends up dancing with Fisk, and Matt ends up with Vanessa, and he confronts Vanessa and, you know, asks her face to face if she was the one who, you know, ordered Foggy's death. And, you know, Vanessa kind of like flicks his tie. Does Heather know you're Daredevil? You know, like, you want to talk secrets? Fuck you. But Matt then hears Dex, as he's like talking to Vanessa, he hears Dex put a round into the chamber, and he, for some reason, jumps in front of Fisk and takes a bullet for him, and it cuts to credits on Matt as this like red spotlight, and everyone like rushes out of the gala, and a red spotlight is above Matt as he's on the floor holding his bullet wound as he's like bleeding out, and then it's like a spotlight of him upside down in red. I was like, dude, some of the cinematography in this season is gorgeous stuff. But Matt's bleeding out as we go to credits on episode 8 as we head into the episode 9 season finale titled Straight to Hell, and we open in blue on Dex looking down the barrel of the gun right where we cut, last episode, and we cut to a year ago when Vanessa went to Dex in prison, hiring him to kill Dumb Benny and Foggy Nelson, his lawyer, and then cutting back to the end of the last episode where Matt took a bullet for Fisk, which, why would he do that? Still doesn't make sense. Should have just let Fisk get shot. Problem over. But maybe Matt was like trying not to let the reason be like that he was the reason that Dex got out of prison, so maybe he doesn't want to be the reason that Fisk ends up getting killed. I don't know. Maybe Matt's like, Dex can't kill Fisk, only I can kill Fisk. I don't know. And then we get the final intro of Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again, and maybe this will be the last time we see this intro because it might change for Season 2. Might not, but maybe it does. We'll find out tomorrow. We then see Matt wakes up in the hospital, still alive from his gunshot wound, and Fisk is alive, but covered in Matt's blood back home, and him and Vanessa are talking. But Matt is focused on trying to find the files that Foggy had. He's already, not even thinking about his bullet wound. He's already back to, what was Foggy doing? What did he find out about Fisk that was making them want to kill him? So now Matt desperately is trying to find these files, but he's saying all this right when he woke up from a bullet wound. So Heather's there thinking he's losing it, and Kristen's there also thinking he's losing it, and he wakes up in the hospital and he goes, Karen, but it's not Karen, it's Heather. So even Heather's like, I think I should go. We then hear Fisk talking to his people, and he wants to close down the city to find Dex for taking a shot at him, but he also sends Buck to the hospital to make Matt succumb to his wounds. And Fisk says, in this case, a dead hero is better than an alive vigilante. And so Fisk is really just trying to make sure that Matt Murdock Daredevil problem is cleaned up, you know what I mean? So he sends Buck to the hospital, but then we cut over to Fisk asking Sheila who is loyal and who is not on his team, and asks her to send everyone that isn't loyal home. And she's like, all right, I'm on it, and then Gallo comes and talks to Sheila thinking that she's still one of, the sane people in the building, and he wants her support, and she tells him he has it, but this might bite Gallo in the ass. We then see Buck show up at the hospital to kill Matt, and he gets a distraction from Fisk, who just caused a citywide power outage, so he should be able to sneak in, kill the, Matt Murdock and get out of there. But Matt has already gotten out of there himself and makes it back to his apartment, where Frank Castle is already there with a fresh shave and a haircut and says, what is this, your new costume? What they call you now? Nightgown man? And this little exchange in Matt's apartment between Frank and Matt is so funny, but also so good. And dude, just Matt and Frank together, need their own show. Or even their own movie. How we just got Deadpool and Wolverine? Imagine Punisher and Daredevil. And that's the movie. It's just those two kicking ass the whole time, bouncing off of each other. I would watch that so quickly. So quickly I would go to the theaters to see Daredevil and Punisher, or whatever. But Frank is at his apartment because he says he made a promise to get Matt out of there alive. And he's not going easy on these fanboys and all these Punisher fake-ass cops, and asks Matt, why would you take a bullet for that asshole? And Matt says, that's a good question. So even Matt is like, I don't know what my instincts were making me do there. I don't know why I would do that. Should have let him take the bullet. But Matt is also, you know, seems to be doing pretty well for a guy that just got shot last episode, but alright. But at this moment, AVTF guys, or the Anti-Vigilante Taskforce guys, are all rushing into Matt's place. And Frank's like, what, you're gonna fight them with your ass hanging out? And Daredevil flips him off. But then we get some pretty sick fighting between the AVTF, Daredevil, and Punisher. And Frank's going a little too hard for Matt's taste as he's killing guys in Matt's apartment. And Matt's like, come on, Frank, stop it. And I'll allow it, Frank. These guys are bastards. They deserve it. But Matt saves Cole North from shooting the Punisher, and then Punisher throws a knife through Cole North's hand to shave Daredevil. And like they both save each other in this moment, but then they both go, hey, it looks like you found your guy with the bullet casings. And Matt finds out that Cole North was the cop who killed Hector Ayala. And Matt just knocks him out as hard as he possibly can. And I think he deserves worse. And, you know, Matt contemplates it. And then Frank says, do it, Red. And Matt says he's not worth it. And asks Frank not to kill him. And Frank's like, oh, come on. You think he's not worth it? Shoots another cop that was like crawling on the ground in pain, and he goes, was he worth it? And he like starts to argue with Frank, and he's pushing him, and he's like, oh, come on, Frank, you can't help yourself, can you? Come on! You know, like they're pissed at each other. But then Matt hears a grenade getting thrown into the apartment, and he goes, oh shit, grenade, run! So they both run to the balcony and leap off, and Matt throws out his baton and grabs Frank as they crash down onto somebody's minivan, and it's just like a great shot of them two then standing in the street like, fuck you, Red, fuck you, Frank, you know, like. So Matt and Frank survive this exploding apartment. Matt's apartment is now gone. It's now ash and on fire. So now maybe his suits that were up on that roof is also gone. So maybe that explains a little bit more why his red suit gets painted black in season 2 of Daredevil Born Again. But, you know, they survive and they land on that guy's minivan, and Matt calls Frank an asshole, and Frank's like, yeah, I know. And Matt's apartment is good and gone and on fire, so maybe all those suits are gone too that we saw in that one shot where we saw like a white one and a yellow one and then a black one. So maybe all those are gone now, so maybe Matt will have to get new suits for future seasons. But they get picked up by Karen Page, and she's back and, like, you know, has been gone almost all season now since, like, what, episode 1 or 2, and now she's back, and she was the reason and the person that asked Frank to have Matt's back, and they end up going back to Frank's safe house spot, and she stitches up Matt and Frank stitches up himself, and she's like, you all right over there, big guy? And he's like, never been better. Only thing that can fix me is a cup of coffee. You want one? And like the look that Frank and Karen exchange here is like, they both love each other so much, but they haven't gotten past that like first kiss. You know what I mean? Like, because as much as I want to see Karen and Matt together, Karen and Frank also work together very well, and I love them together, and I love how much Frank cares about Karen so much. Karen and Matt decide to team up like old times to find Foggy's old files, and she's going to be Matt's eyes, and she's like, I'll always be your eyes, anytime, brother. But we see that they're going to look after what Foggy was working on and like see what Foggy found out about the Fisks that made them want to kill him. And Frank says he's not interested in that, and Karen says, I'm not buying it, Frank, that you don't care. And Frank says, you asked me to do you a favor, and I did it. And she's like, yes, you did, thank you. And you can just see how much on Frank's face that he cares about Karen as he says, like, yeah, you too, you stay safe out there, Karen, as he like looks out the window. And like, God, Jon Bernthal as the Punisher is perfect. Like, he knows the character better than anybody else would ever be able to play the Punisher. Like, he's perfect. No wonder why he wrote and is starring in the Punisher special presentation that's going to be coming out later this year. We then cut back over to Daniel and Buck as they are at a city council meeting, and they have blackmail on all of the members of this like city council, and Daniel is really looking like Baby Soprano here, and just the way that like Buck has his back behind him, and he has like this suit on but no tie, and he's got suspenders on. He kind of has his like thumbs in his pants, and he's like, "Thank you, Buck." And then he like kind of like looks back and like talks shit to the council. And just this one scene, I was like, holy shit, Michael Gandolfini looks like Tony Soprano so much right here. Like, wow. But we then see that the city is rioting and there's looters, and you know, the cops are killing innocent kids and just pulling down their beanie caps and being like, no, it's a mass vigilante, I don't know what you're talking about, you know, like just bad stuff going on down in New York right now. And Matt asks Karen about her feelings for Frank, and she says, you know, it was just adrenaline when I saw him, and I'm sure it was nothing. And she goes, did you hear my heartbeat when I saw you? And Matt just says, adrenaline, I'm sure it was nothing. And, you know, so the both of them, you know, acknowledging that, like, she does care about Frank, but she also is like, I care a lot more about you. Did you hear my heartbeat when I looked at you, motherfucker? And he's like, I did, yeah. Just wondering, though, if you love Frank or if you love me, you know? Like, fuck you, Matt. Get your head in the game. We're talking about Foggy here. We're not worried about your love life anymore. Karen then asks Foggy, you know, they find a box with some old stuff from the old office. And one of the little plaques says, avocados at law. And she's like, I never understood that joke. And he says, abogatos, which is Spanish for lawyers. And so one night Foggy was drunk and it became avocados at law. And, you know, they have a laugh over that. And he says that he's really glad she's back, and you know, she's like, I'm glad you're back too, you know, Daredevil. But then they find the files Foggy had against Fisk, and they find out that Red Hook port is a free port, and you know, that's would be able to let them get away with murder at that port. So, you know, they're like, we gotta stop this. And Matt's like, they're trying to build their own city-state. I don't know, but either way, what Fisk is up to, no bueno here. But Frank shows up to where all the AVTF are, because he had like a little radio from the previous fight that they had. So Frank was listening to all the Anti-Vigilante Taskforce chatter on the radio comms and figures out that they all went back to Red Hook. So Frank goes down there himself and tries to take all of them out by himself, and they are using non-lethal, you know, what are those things called? Like little sandbags or little bean bags, little, I don't know, the things, cornhole bags, I don't know. Bean bags? Yeah, whatever, you get my point. Little pellet bags, like they're shooting Frank with non-lethals while Frank is shooting them with lethal weaponry, and Frank takes out at least 8 to 10 of their guys before they knock him out unconscious and capture him. Frank really hates these Anti-Vigilante Task Force guys because they keep taking his Punisher logo and then using it for themselves like he has anything to do with them. And, you know, they're all a bunch of punk fanboys, really. Sheila then shows Fisk a recording of Commissioner Gallo that she took when she was having that conversation with him in conspiring against Fisk. And we see that Gallo has a new driver, and he has a new Punisher tattoo on his neck. And he brings Gallo to Fisk, and we see a brutal murder where Fisk smushes Gallo's head and rips his face apart, and it may be one of the most brutal kills we've seen in all of the MCU. And like, I think the only one that's more brutal than this that I can even think of is in Ant-Man 1, where he like turns that guy into some goop and like just picks him up with some paper towel and flushes him down the toilet. You know, like that's probably the worst death I've seen, but this is pretty bad. Like Commissioner Gallo, this is fucked stuff that we're seeing in this series here. But at the same time, we see Powell in the Anti-Vigilante Task Force trying to get Frank to join their task force. But Frank tells them to go fuck themselves and says fuck no. And they start beating him up, and he's just like, yeah, this is all you got? I could take it. You know, like, Frank, they're going to need to beat Frank a lot more if they want him to join them. You know, that's never going to happen. We then see Matt and Karen make it over to the Red Hook port, and Matt's about to go in, but Karen talks him out of going right in right away with, you know, not knowing what's in there. And Matt reluctantly agrees with Karen, but he says that they can beat Fisk and they will take back the city, but we are going to need an army. And meanwhile, the lights come back on in New York the next day, and Heather decides to join Team Fisk as the Commissioner of Mental Health, and she says it would be an honor. Traitor. So Heather's a traitor. Fuck Heather. Fuck everything about Heather. At this moment, I now hate Heather. I know I said earlier in this episode that I thought her and Matt were good together. No. Fuck Heather. She's a traitor. We then see Fisk goes live on television on a new broadcast and says that Gallo resigned last night and that he's enacting his Safer Streets initiative, and that makes all vigilante activity illegal, and that there will be a curfew now at 8 p.m. in a curfew in New York City, the city that never sleeps. You're going to put a curfew at 8 p.m.? That's crazy. But either way, and he now says that New York City is under martial law, and then ends it by saying, never forget, I love New York. And then he does this like creepy smile into camera, and you're like, oof, ugh, God, Kingpin. Gross. But we then cut over to Matt telling Karen that ever since Foggy died, he didn't know who he was anymore. And Karen tells him that Foggy believed in him, and he knew all of you, and I do too, and kisses Matt on the forehead. And this is all in the back of Josie's bar, and they are going to see the current army that Matt has put together with Cherry, Detective Kim, Karen, Josie, and a couple of other good cops, but not many, and they're going to need a lot more and a lot more help if they're going to take down Fisk. But we also know that Jessica Jones for sure will be joining this team for season 2, but maybe the rest of the Defenders. We don't know about them, but possibly, and then who knows, maybe Frank, but we'll see where he's at as well. But we also see that Fisk has the swordsman and anyone who spoke out against him in cells down in this little like area, I think where Adam was, but now that Adam's killed, they just put a bunch of cells in this area. They're locking up people like swordsmen and anybody that's, you know, got money but is working against Fisk. And then we also see that Frank Castle is down in one of these cells as Fisk and Vanessa have dinner together in front of the bloody rabbit in the snowstorm painting. But instead of Fisk eating in front of this by himself, the Fisks with Vanessa and him are both back together, very powerful, reunited, you know. So as we're like seeing all these different clips of this like montage happening at the end of the season finale, we are hearing Matt's voice as he's addressing the room. And he says, I can't see my city, but I can feel it. The system isn't working. It's rotten, corrupt. But this is our city, not his, and we can take it back together. The weak, the strong, all of us. Resist, rebel, rebuild, because we are the city without fear, which of course the man without fear references Daredevil and his comics, you know. And we see shots of like everyone in the show during this speech, and we see, you know, Angela, we see, you know, the cops, we see Detective Kim, we see Cherry, we see Dex, we see Buck, we see Daniel, we see Sheila, we see everybody that's had anything to do with the show up to this point. We see everybody. We even see multiple people from like the BB reports, you know, like literally see all of New York in this little montage as it's all going through together. And you know, Matt's giving this great speech, and then it kind of ends as with a shot of Daredevil through, you know, the window of Josie's, and it's like covered in newspaper, but this one spot isn't, as they pull back and Daredevil gets lit up by red light as he's standing inside Josie's, you know, building his army, getting ready for season 2. And that's where credits hit on season 1 of Daredevil Born Again. But then we have a post-credits scene where Frank Castle busts a poor anti-vigilante task force guy named Anthony, and he breaks his arm and breaks himself out of his cell so he can go and be in Spider-Man Brand New Day. And, reports at the current moment is that Daredevil isn't in Spider-Man, but Frank isn't in Born Again Season 2. So I don't think either of those are going to be the case. I think Frank has to be in Season 2 of Daredevil Born Again, and then we know Frank's in Spider-Man. So if Frank and maybe even Spider-Man is in Daredevil Born Again Season 2, although that one I doubt, but I would think Frank's in this season and then goes into Spider-Man Brand New Day. But I would also think that, like, if the Hand are in Spider-Man Brand New Day and Frank Castle, how is Daredevil not in Spider-Man Brand New Day? Unless it's all explained in Season 2, which drops tomorrow, which will drop tonight by the time this video comes out, and Wednesday sometime my breakdown for Daredevil Born Again Season 2, Episode 1 will be out, so stay tuned for that. And I hope you guys enjoyed this little recap and breakdown of the full season. I know these are longer videos, but nonetheless, I hope you made it all the way to the end. And if you did here, please tell me what your favorite part of Daredevil Born Again Season 1 is, and how excited are you for Born Again Season 2? I know I am ecstatic, but thank you guys so much for making it this far into the video. If you want to chat more Daredevil with me, you can drop those down in the comment section below, or you can send me your thoughts to my other social medias, links down in the description below. Once again, if you guys made it this far into the video and you would like to support the channel, the best way of doing that is liking this video, commenting down below, subscribing if you haven't already, and hitting that bell so you don't miss future Daredevil Born Again breakdowns and you get the notifications when those come out. Once again, my name's Big Cam, and I'll see you gorgeous folks in the next episode. Peace!